Good morning. On behalf of my co-chair, Swee Chen, and the Council for Board Diversity, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for choosing to spend your Friday morning with us. So over the next half hour or so, we will cover our 2025 annual board diversity statistics and key findings from our new joint study with Egon Zehnder on boardroom diversity, inclusion, and culture. Following that, we will move to the highlight of today's event, the fireside chat with my friend Peter Seah, who hardly needs introduction. I think it's just as well that he needs any introduction, because if I were try to list his many accomplishments and designations, it will take too long. However, I do want to say that beyond chairing organizations like Singapore Airlines and DBS Bank, Peter brings rare, hard-earned insights into how boards work through complexity, change, and tough decisions. Drawing on his experiences, we will explore how diversity and inclusive board practices strengthen how we directors perform as stewards of our organizations. So Peter, thank you for generously sharing your time and perspective with us today. But before we get into the real substance of our discussions, I thought it would be useful to first share a little bit about the Council for Board Diversity and the work we do. The Council of Board Diversity, or CBD as we affectionately call it, was established in 2014 by the Ministry of Social and Family Development and formally took on its today's name in 2019. It has been more than a decade-long journey with our early focus addressing the most pressing gap, gender diversity on boards. So with President Tharman as patron, the Council brings together a group of highly experienced leaders, each with a distinct lens and influence across sectors. And many of them are actually with us today. Together, they provide clear guidance and drive meaningful change, drawing on their depth of experience and cross-sector perspectives. Our work is anchored on three outcomes. First, greater diversity on board, starting with an increase in women directors, which is a visible and measurable indicator of diversity. But at the same time, we do recognize that diversity is broader than gender, and going forward, we are placing growing emphasis on other dimensions such as skills and experience, age, and so on. Second, diversity must translate to better board outcomes. The focus is not diversity for its own sake, but as a lever to improve board effectiveness and quality of judgment and decision making. Third, beyond individual boards, diverse board composition signals a mature and open and credible governance ecosystem. And these are indicators that global partners and investors look at as a mark of institutional strength and governance standards. And that supports Singapore as a trusted and competitive global business hub. With diversity adoption maturing, we must progress beyond compliance and representation. We need to build true conviction, an environment where its benefits are instinctively understood, actively leveraged, and embraced as a strategic strength. With this in mind, and to deepen our understanding of how diversity is actually experienced and practiced in boardrooms across Singapore, the Council engaged leadership advisory firm Egon Zehnder to conduct the first study on board diversity, conviction, practices, and challenges. We're trying to look beyond the numbers to what is the actual lived experiences and what are the real challenges that boards face. The study draws on both survey findings and in-depth interviews with board leaders at SGX Singapore listed companies. The qualitative aspect of this study goes hand in hand with our statistics and deepens our understanding of the current state of diversity and inclusivity practices on boards. So I hope that this brief overview has helped to set the context for the data and the discussion to follow. But before I step off and hand over to our Executive Director, Sacha Tong, to provide an overview of the board diversity statistics, I just want to emphasize again that the Council has no interest in just chasing numbers. Metrics matter only insofar as they help us see direction, patterns, and understand momentum, and inform conversations like the one that we are having today. On that note, thank you very much, and over to Sacha.
Thank you, Seow Kee, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Now, every year since 2013, the CBD has systematically tracked board composition as a long-term indicator of progress. Now, as we reflect on the statistics shown today, it is important to focus on emerging patterns over a longer time horizon, instead of being fixated or overemphasizing on a single year's movement, because that doesn't quite tell the complete story. Now, as at December 2025, the Council's data shows continued growth in the participation of women on boards across all sectors. While we aren't quite where we would like to be just yet, it is encouraging to see that real progress has been made over the course of the past few years. Drawing your attention to the middle box under statutory boards, we see that the public sector continued to set pace, with women now holding 36.1% of total board seats, up from 34.3% just a year earlier. Now, in the not-for-profit space, IPCs collectively increased women participation on boards by 1.3 percentage points to 35.6. And not to worry, that number is not on the screen, so your eyes are not playing tricks on you. Although the top 100 IPCs by donation receipts still trail the sector average slightly at 31.6%. Now, in the listed sector, women today hold 25.8% of board seats among the top 100 SGX primary listed companies. If any of you may recall last year's data, or the year before that, 2024, we were at 25.1. So that is a very modest increase of 0.7 percentage points. However, we need to look at the data in its entirety. If you compare it to 2013, when we first started tracking data, it represents an 18-point increase. So we have come a really long way since then. Now, data points across the sectors are not intended to be a basis for comparison, nor a mechanism for competition. And I know in the Singapore context, we're all very eager to outperform each other, but that's not the point. Each sector has its own distinct characteristics, challenges, and different starting points. So behind these outcomes, three drivers have been consistently important. Firstly, progress is the strongest when board chairs and nominating committee chairs set pace. They take an early and intentional approach to succession planning, as well as board talent identification. Now, looking beyond traditional known networks and fostering an environment where diversity practices are well embraced. Now, secondly, in today's environment, the conversation is not on the availability or the supply of board-ready women anymore, but visibility and access to board opportunities. Now, with concerted efforts across many parts of the ecosystem around broadening networks, as well as making available board pathways, improved visibility and access is beginning to translate into very tangible outcomes, and that is board appointments. Now, lastly, a continued focus on governance excellence anchors this progress on gender diversity on boards. Beyond SGX's 9-year tenure limits, enhancements to governance codes and governance frameworks are reinforcing board renewal and strengthening overall standards. Now, let me further unpack women's participation on boards. Now, women are still under-tapped for board leadership roles. We see that among these top 100 companies, we now have 10 women chairs, up 8 from the previous year. Now, other sectors across stat boards and top 100 IPCs fare marginally better at 23% and 16% respectively. But this is still disproportionately low. but it nonetheless signals that progress has moved beyond representation to influence. And this is where women are shaping board agenda and board outcomes. Now, if you look more broadly at other board committees, we find encouraging results that women are increasingly chairing these committees, although there is a slight dip in the nominating committee chairmanship from last year. However, across the board, it is a year-on-year increase. Now, as part of our analysis, we observed that organizations who have female nominating committee chairs, or with at least one committee chaired by a woman, tend to see a higher inflow of new women directors. Now, this reflects different and broader networks that these women chair bring to facilitate identification of a wider pool of candidates. Now, to be clear, this is not about preference. I think that is quite important to note. The Council firmly believes that a range of diversities on boards need to be fit for purpose, and that is aligned to an organization's needs as well as ambition. And most importantly, it has to be merit-based. Now, staying on the listed sector, an equally important data point is the deepening of the overall talent pool. Now, between 2021 and 2025, 1,200 men and women took on their first board role at an SGX issuer, and 20% of that went to a top 100 company during the same duration. Now, this represents a year-on-year increase of roughly 2% across the last 8 years. Now, these appointments speak to the importance of renewal and to the systems and practices that are in place to enable boards to refresh themselves continually and thoughtfully over time. Now, from the pool of newly appointed directors, we find that boards are increasingly recognizing diverse leadership experience, whether functional leaders or regional heads, or even those with deep domain expertise. So this strays away from the traditional CEO profile. However, even as definition of leadership experience broadens, we find that boards continue to place weight and importance on individuals with direct accountability for financial performance and outcomes. So at the same time, as tech and AI, and I'm sure everyone cannot go a single day without mentioning or hearing the word tech and AI, boards are increasingly looking for digital and technological fluency as an addition, and I think that's the most important thing to note. It does not replace the need and the demand for strong business expertise. So while the data gives us a clear sense of direction that we are heading in the right way, we can take some encouragement as well from the progress that we have seen over the past few years. We now come to a more important question. How do we build on this? And what levers need to be pulled in order for us to move forward? And with that, let me hand over to Ang Wan Mei, Managing Partner of Egon Zehnder Singapore, who led this joint study. And she will take us through some of the key insights and findings. Wan Mei will also be facilitating the discussion with Peter that will be happening shortly after. So thank you, and over to you, Wan Mei.